Hi everyone, Stepan here. In today's video I'm going to continue the series on the Semi-Slav with the Anti-Meran positions. So in the last video we were looking at positions after knight b to d7 for black, where white plays the move bishop d3. And with bishop d3 we enter the Meran, which starts with dc4, bishop c4 and b5. And today we are going to be looking at so-called anti-Meran positions or anti-Meran positions, where white avoids the development of the bishop to d3 to make sure he doesn't allow black to take on c4 with tempo and then to play b5 with tempo, which makes it easier to open up his dark squared bishop, his light squared bishop on c8. So the anti-Meran positions are going to be all moves that are not bishop d3 on move 6 for white. By far the most common move, in fact a move that is more common than bishop d3 in this position with more than 14,000 games, is the move queen to c2. And this is the move we are going to be focusing on the most. The other two moves we are going to be looking at are going to be bishop e2 and b3. Those are the two most common anti-Meran positions which are not queen c2. So let's start with b3, which is, it can transpose to queen c2 lines, and very often after queen c2 white is still going to go for b3 and bishop b2 or bishop a3, fianchettoing the bishop, but there are some subtleties which black can go for here when b3 is played on move 6 immediately. One thing I would like to mention, the normal move that black plays in most of these positions is bishop d6. This move is going to be played most often against queen c2 on move 6 for black. The reason behind developing your bishop to d6 is that you're not going to be playing c5, and your bishop is not going to have to recapture on c5 if white takes. Instead of that, more commonly, because it's now become much harder to develop your c8 bishop because you don't have dc4 and b5 and a6 and c5, you're going to have to develop your bishop this way. And that is why bishop d6 is in nature a very normal and the best move here, the best placement for the bishop, because often black goes for setups with bishop d6, queen c7 and e5. e5 is the way you're going to play to try and develop your c8 bishop. That's one very important thing to know about anti-Merans. Anti-Merans are positions in which white is basically saying you're not going to develop your c8 bishop easily, and black needs to factor that in and play accordingly. But bishop d6 is an inferior move here. I will recommend a different move, and I'm going to show you why. After bishop b2 here, castles, bishop d3, e5 can be played immediately, and it should be played immediately as soon as possible, even at the cost of an isolated queen's pawn, as we are going to see. cd5, cd5, d5, knight e5, bishop e2, and after knight f3, bishop e5, black now has an isolated pawn position, which I myself don't like and don't enjoy playing. You could say that playing IQP positions is good for your chess. Well, go ahead, it is good for your chess, but it's more unpleasant than the other option black has on move 6. This now, after white castles and bishop f5, rook c1, is an even position, but any piece trades are going to favor white, because the d5 pawn is going to be a structural weakness further on in the game, later on in the game, and then the endgame is basically better for white because he has a perfect pawn structure. So after b3, I wouldn't recommend bishop d6, which seems like the most common move. I would recommend bishop b4, which is in fact more usual in this position. Now, immediately, black is forcing white to make a decision. Does he defend with bishop b2, which is the most natural square, or does he go to d2? If the bishop goes to b2, then immediately queen a5 can put a lot of pressure on the knight and force the queen to defend the knight as well. And then, if something like this happens, queen a5, let's say you try to defend, and now knight e4. This is a very common plan in the Nimzo-Indian, where the bishop is on b4, and now already white is almost busted. You are going to lose the a2 pawn. There's no other way to defend. I mean, what do you do here? So after the move b3, the move bishop b4 is played to provoke the bishop away from its most natural square, its prepared square on b2. So now bishop d2. And now you can see that the move b3 is a silly move. Well, It does defend the c4 square, so in case black makes a mistake and takes here, then the pawn is going to take in some cases. So that's one thing, but usually b3 is played in the semi-Slav to make room for the bishop on the long diagonal. So now black has won a small opening victory. Black castles, bishop d3, queen to e7. Why does black play queen e7? Where, well, both queen c7 and queen e7 are played to reinforce e5. It will depend on the situation, but both can work. Castles, and as soon as you get the opportunity to play e5, play it. You have to play e5 as soon as possible, or you're going to be left with a dead c8 bishop for the rest of the game, and you're going to lose. Now, of course, black is threatening e4, which is not good, so d e5, knight e5, knight e5, queen takes e5, and now a tricky move because your bishop is hanging on b4, knight d5. You take once to make sure your bishop is defended. Of course, bishop takes bishop would be a blunder, so c d5. And now bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, queen takes d5, queen to c2, and queen to h5, defending h7. Not much more to say about this position, but equal. If anybody is better, it's black, but it's such a minute advantage that it shouldn't really be mentioned. The advantage black has here is that he has a better pawn majority. It's going to be easier to utilize your 3-2 on the queen side. Then it's going to be for white to utilize his 4-3, simply because the black king is closer to the king side and it's on the king side and can do a good job in stopping the pawn majority. So the move b3 can be refuted as a move going for an advantage with bishop b4, and you don't need more than 15 minutes to learn this variation. Rewatch this a couple of times. If you ever encounter the b3 in the Anti-Meran, just bishop b4 and you are fine, you are equal. Another move which I don't like for white, and hence why queen c2 has been played 14,000 times, bishop e2 like 300 times, is the move bishop e2. Now you do continue with bishop d6, bishop b4 doesn't make any sense. You once again either want to play c5 or e5. In this line it's going to be possible to play both. Bishop d6, castles, castles, b3, now it doesn't make sense to play bishop b4, you will be just losing a tempo. Instead, black is going to fianchetto his bishop to b6, bishop b2, bishop b7, queen c2, queen e7, reinforcing e5, reinforcing c5. Rook a d1, stopping e5 for the moment because there's too much tension on the d pawn. Rook a d8, rook fe1, rook fe8, bishop f1, and now you can choose e5 or c5. I'm going to show you my preferred method to fight in this position and to break open the position. The one thing you have to know is you have to play one of these. I would recommend the move c5 because it's more active here. D takes c5, B takes c5. The other reason why I like the move c5 instead of e5 is that you can recapture with your b pawn and have 3 pawns in the center, which is more than white has. You do have an isolated a7 pawn, but I would regard that as, well, not such a big problem here. cd5, ed5, hanging pawns for black. g3, white wants to fianchetto his bishop now. Bishop c7. Trying to do something with the hanging pawns is a middle game strategy which involves a lot of understanding. I would recommend that you look at some hanging pawns games. You can find them by searching hanging pawns chessgames.com, and you can find that. So bishop g2, bishop a5, pinning the knight, rook c1, knight e4, a lot of pressure on the knight now, and after rook ed1 unpinning you just exchange. And once again, after queen c3, rook c8, black is perfectly fine. I would prefer to be black here. Not an advantage, but you have a knight coming in on e4. Your d5 pawn is defended by the bishop, so no problem there. Your queen and both your rooks are perfect, and it's an equal position. What I'm trying to say, after knight bd7, if white plays bishop e2, he's going for equality, and you never want to do that with white. And now, let's look at queen c2, the only move that goes for an advantage for white. Once again, I've mentioned this several times before. Alexei Drev, the best Semi-Slav player of all time, Get his book Meran and Anti-Meran. He covers what I did in the previous video and what I'm doing here. He covers the Anti-Merans perfectly. Now, against Queen c2, which is the emphasis in the book, of course, he gives two moves. Bishop d6 is the main move, by far. And if you've seen my training game I've published yesterday, b6 is the second move. b6 is an okay move going for a fianchetto, but note this, accepting an isolated queen's pawn in most positions. Bishop d3, bishop b7. White castles, you play bishop e7, developing normally. b3, white goes for a fianchetto, you castle, bishop b2, h6, stopping knight g5, rook a d1, queen c7. You want to play e5 or c5 if possible. And after queen e2, rook a d8, bishop b1, rook f e8, it's now becoming hard to play any of these pawn breaks. You could play them, and I'm not saying they are bad moves, but you need to time it perfectly, and you need to play for either e5 and c5 with great care. That's why in this position, and we are still sort of in theory, if you turn on the engine, white is going to have a slight advantage because black doesn't have an easy time playing these breaks. Let's say queen c2, which looks like a very good move. Now, if you try e5 here, I don't think that would work. If takes, you are going to be left with a very weak pawn, and I'm sorry, there's something much worse here. Okay, yeah, there's a discovery by the bishop. Okay, that doesn't work. So let's try c5, queen c2, c5. I'm guessing something horrible happens here too. Okay, here you just get left with an isolated pawn, I guess, and you are slightly worse. It's not easy to defend this. Not in every position is an isolated pawn a good thing. So here you need to be really careful with what you do next. Let's say queen c2, and now black tries to play sensible moves. I think that, well, bishop d6 is one option. I would recommend an idea with a6 and b5, trying to lock the position down on the queen side, provoking this pawn to c5 and then going for e5. We could see that here white's most common move is h3 on move 14, and now once you try a6, knight e5, b5, c5 is going to happen because there's no good way for white to react. So after knight d7, queen d7, c5, you now can first try, well, you can try two plans, and I've been studying these positions after my training game with Nigel, because I was worried about playing either e5 or c5 earlier on. So here one plan is a5, b4, bishop a6, which is a good plan if white allows it, but white is not going to allow it. So once you play a5, something like bishop d3 can be played, stopping bishop a6. So now b4 would be, I don't know, a weakening move. So something like rook a8 and a3, and the position is roughly equal. So that's one plan. Another plan which you can go for after you've tried this, and once it fails, but you should still try it, is going for e5. And that's going to be your main break here. So this might sound strange, but bishop d8, bishop c7, e5 is what you should be going for. You can also reinforce that, well, let's say white plays b4. That makes sense. You close the position down. Or, well, you have a rook on the a file, so, but then, yeah, okay, that's fine. So if white plays rook a1 later on, you can play bishop c7. So bishop c7. And now you have two defenders of e5. White has one defender of e5. Now, if the move f4 comes, this could be trouble, but I don't think it's enough trouble for black. You can now get your knight into e4 and try to play around the weaknesses. You can also try to go something like queen d8, let's say rook a1, knight d7, let's say takes, I don't know. You can now try f6 and e5 still, and you have to know that strategically this is going to be hard to play for black if white plays perfectly. So let me just remind you where we are after queen c2. If you go for the move b6, if white plays ideally, it's going to be hard to play e5, and you might get those kinds of messy positions where you need to play bishop e7, bishop d8, bishop c7, queen d8, knight d7, f6, e5. But one thing you need to remember is that you need to get e5 through. You need to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to lose. Be careful with it. before move 15 or so. As you saw, that could lead to trouble, but later on, once you consolidate on the queen side, that is definitely a must-play move. Otherwise, this guy is dead and you lose the game. If you don't want to get into any of that, the simpler move to play is bishop d6, bishop d3. Bishop e2 can also be played, but then transpose, because after castles, dc4, bishop c4 is going to be played even if the bishop is on e2. And now we have something resembling the Meran because of b5, bishop e2, bishop b7. So now we have something similar to what we've been looking at in the previous video, but there's a difference. Rook d1, queen c7, e4, and now e5. In these lines where the queen is on c2, you don't really have time to play a6 and c5. You go for the move e5, and that's the way to open up your bishop. That's the crucial idea. So after e4, remember that in queen c2 lines with bishop d6, whenever e4 is played, you play e5. That's a very general rule, but to this position it can be applied with super precision. Bishop g5, e d4, rook d4, and now knight e5. You want to liberate the e5 square for your knight. And now, as you can see, a6 and c5 can be played. That can be one strategy, but at your own leisure, you can open up this bishop, and it's going to be a piece which is alive. You could also go bishop c8 and just play on this diagonal if it comes to the worst. g3, stopping any tricks with queen h2, bishop c5, attacking the rook, and now we get into a theoretical line which you should know if you play the Semi-Slav, but it's sort of tricky to learn. Rook d2, knight f to g4, putting pressure on the f2 pawn, and now you can see that the black is on the attack. So the anti-Meran is not as simple to play as the Meran position. Knight d1, he has to defend passively, the bishop is under attack, so bishop e4, rook d4, bishop a5, transferring the bishop either to b6 or leaving it here. Knight takes e5, queen takes e5. We want to keep this knight attacking the f2 pawn. Rook d7, attacking the bishop, bishop c8, attacking the rook, and now bishop f4, a counter tempo on the queen, queen h5, and now white is forced to give up the bishop because h2 is under attack. And after rook d3, we have a roughly equal position in which nobody is really better. Here bishop e6 is the main move. Queen c6 is, well, I'm going to say risky at least. Let's see, that has never been played. Yeah, if queen c6, probably just giving up a pawn for activity is enough. If white doesn't play queen c6, then the position is equal or slightly better for black. So the anti-Meran, if played perfectly by black, and once again, I want to recommend the move bishop d6 and not b6 because it's easier to play. If played perfectly by black, is an extremely pleasant position. Most Semi-Slav players dread queen c2 and anti-Merans. You shouldn't. Rejoice, because it's simpler to play than the Reynolds attack or whatever else very complicated that could occur after bishop d3. Okay, thank you very much for watching. This is it on the Meran and anti-Meran. We are going to continue with the much more aggressive move bishop g5 next, and look at the Moscow and the anti-Moscow. And I hope you like that as well. Hope you get different ideas about what to play with white against the Semi-Slav, and that my fellow Semi-Slav players managed to prepare much better against the aggressive d4 player. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.